Sometimes life feels like a treadmill you can't step off. You wake up, and before you can even enjoy your first sip of coffee, you're already thinking about the 100 things waiting for you. Emails, calls, deadlines. That one problem you've been avoiding because you just don't have the time to deal with it. And somehow, even when you push through the day, there's this quiet little voice inside, whispering, "Is this really what you wanted?" That's the place Dan Martell knows very well. Not just in theory, he's lived it. This is a man who built companies, hit incredible successes, but also nearly burned himself out in the process. The turning point for him wasn't some magical overnight change. It was this deep realization that the very thing he thought he was chasing, freedom, was slipping away from him because he was trapped in the busyness of his own making. And that's really what Buy Back Your Time is about. It's not just about time management. It's about reclaiming your life from the constant pull of tasks, obligations, and distractions, so you can build something meaningful without losing yourself in the process. Now, when you hear "buy back your time," it might sound like a fancy phrase, but Dan means it very literally. The idea is this: you can actually purchase your time back, not by buying hours on a clock, of course, but by creating systems, delegating tasks, and making intentional decisions so that the hours of your day are spent on what truly matters to you. And here's the thing: most people don't realize that the way they're spending their time is actually costing them their dreams. They think, "I'll do it all myself to save money." But what they're really doing is spending their most valuable currency, their life, on the wrong things. Dan says if you want to grow, you can't just work harder. You have to buy back the hours you've been selling away to busyness. He learned this the hard way. There was a point in his journey when his schedule was so full, he felt like a prisoner inside his own success. You know that feeling when you've built something, but it's running you instead of the other way around. He was there, and one day, he asked himself a question that changed everything. If I keep living like this, where will I end up in 5 years? The answer scared him, so he decided to flip the script. Instead of thinking, "How can I do more?" he started asking, "How can I buy back my time so I can do what only I can do?" That's the heart of this book. You identify the tasks in your life that drain you or keep you stuck, and you find ways to replace yourself in those tasks so you can focus on the work and the life that actually lights you up. He calls this the buyback principle, and it's simple but powerful. Never hire to grow your business. Hire to buy back your time. It's not about getting more people so you can make more money immediately. It's about freeing yourself from the things that weigh you down so you can spend more time in your zone of genius, the place where your unique skills and passions create the most value. And this doesn't just apply to business owners. Even if you're working a job or running a household, the same truth stands. If you're spending hours on tasks that don't require you, you're trading your life away for something that could be done differently, or by someone else. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, just tap that like button. And hey, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? I'd honestly love to know. All right, back to the story. Dan shares that one of the first steps is to actually look at your calendar like it's a mirror. Not just to see the meetings and tasks, but to see yourself in them. Are you spending your days on things that energize you or things that drain you? Are you making space for your creativity, your relationships, your health? Or have those become someday priorities that never quite make it onto the list? He uses something called the buyback loop, a repeating cycle of 3 steps: audit, transfer, and fill. First, you audit your time. Really, you get honest about where it's going. This part can be uncomfortable because it forces you to face how much of your life is spent on things that don't matter as much as you think they do. Then you transfer, which means you either delegate, automate, or eliminate the things that aren't worth your personal hours. This is where a lot of people hesitate. They think, "But I can do it faster myself," or "It's just easier if I handle it." Dan says that's a trap, because every time you keep a task that someone else could do, you're choosing to spend your time on that instead of on the thing that could actually change your life. The final step is fill. Once you've freed up time, you intentionally fill it with activities that expand your capacity, your joy, or your income. This is key, because if you just free up time and then let it get swallowed by more low-value tasks, you haven't bought it back. You've just resold it to the wrong things. Dan tells stories of moments when buying back his time wasn't just about money. It was about emotional space, about being able to go for a walk in the middle of the day without guilt, about having the bandwidth to sit with a friend and have a real conversation instead of rushing off to the next meeting. That's the kind of wealth we forget to measure, the wealth of moments we actually live. And here's the beautiful part. When you buy back your time, you don't just win. Everyone around you does too. Your team gets more trust and responsibility. Your family gets more of you. The present, not distracted you. And you get to show up in the world from a place of strength instead of exhaustion. Think about it. How many times have you said, I just need to get through this week, and then I'll have more time? But that then never comes. The truth is, you don't find time. You make it. And in Dan's world, you buy it, not with dollars alone, but with decisions. He gives plenty of examples of how this works in real life, like hiring a virtual assistant for a few hours a week to handle emails and scheduling, or using a grocery delivery service instead of spending 2 hours wandering aisles, or creating repeatable processes in your business so you're not reinventing the wheel every time. The magic is that these aren't just hacks, they're shifts in how you think about your value. When you realize that your best energy should go toward the things only you can do, the creative, the strategic, the deeply human, you stop hoarding tasks like they're badges of honor. You start letting go, and letting go feels like breathing again. Of course, Dan also talks about the resistance people have, the guilt of paying someone to do something you can do yourself, the fear that delegating means you're lazy. He's quick to remind us, buying back your time isn't about escaping work. It's about upgrading the work you do so you can give the best of yourself, not the leftovers. And there's this subtle but powerful point he makes. Your future self is counting on you. The version of you in 5 years, the one you hope will be healthier, happier, more fulfilled, can only exist if you protect her time today. It's easy to imagine that person and think, she'll have more balance. She'll be doing meaningful work. She'll have time for family, hobbies, travel. But none of that magically appears. It's built hour by hour, decision by decision, starting now. Dan's own life became living proof. Once he began to buy back his time, he didn't just grow his businesses. He grew himself. He started having more energy, more clarity, and more joy. And here's the thing. He didn't get there by working more hours. He got there by choosing better hours. And maybe that's the most freeing part of his message. You don't have to wait for some perfect future moment to reclaim your life. You can start with one small choice today. Identify one thing you're doing that drains you. Find a way to transfer it, even if it's imperfect at first. Then take the time you've freed and put it into something that makes you feel alive. That's how it starts. And over time, those reclaimed hours start to add up into a life that actually feels like yours again. So as we close this conversation, I want you to picture something. Imagine looking at your calendar a year from now, but instead of seeing a wall of back-to-back obligations, you see space. Space for creativity. Space for the people you love. Space for rest without guilt. That's what buying back your time makes possible. And if Dan Martell could go from being trapped by his own success to living with that kind of freedom, maybe you can too. Because the truth is, your life isn't measured by how much you do. It's measured by how deeply you live the moments you have. And those moments, they're worth buying back. And maybe you're sitting there right now thinking, okay, I get it. I need to buy back my time. But where do I even start? There's so much on my plate. How do I pick the very first thing to delegate? That's the million-dollar question. And here's the truth. The first task you should delegate isn't necessarily the biggest task you have. It's not even the one that takes the most hours. It's the one that drains your energy the most while creating the least value in return. Dan Martell calls this your time suck task. It's that thing you keep doing because it feels easier to just get it over with than to figure out another way. But every time you do it, a little part of your focus, your creativity, your joy, it leaks away. You can usually spot this task because you never look forward to it. You might even procrastinate on it until the last possible moment. And when you're doing it, you find yourself checking the clock, counting down the minutes. It's not that you can't do it well. In fact, you probably do it just fine. But the cost it takes from you is bigger than the result it gives back. Here's the tricky part. Most of us are so used to carrying these tasks that we stop questioning them. We just fold them into our routine like laundry. And before we know it, they've been with us for years. So the first step is awareness. I want you to take a quiet moment, maybe even pause this video later, and think about the last week of your life. Which task made you sigh before you even started it? Which one made you feel like your day was slipping away? That's your prime candidate for delegation. Let me give you an example. Dan shares about a time early in his journey when he was spending hours each week sorting through his inbox. He told himself it was important. After all, email is part of running a business. But if he was honest, only a tiny fraction of those emails really needed him. The rest could have been answered, organized, or even deleted by someone else. When he finally hired a virtual assistant to handle his inbox, something amazing happened. It wasn't just that he got those hours back. It was that he stopped waking up each morning with the weight of hundreds of unread messages hanging over him. His mind felt lighter, and with that extra mental clarity, he could give his best energy to the work that actually moved his business forward. And maybe you're thinking, that's fine for Dan. He could afford an assistant, but I'm not there yet. Here's the good news. You don't have to start big. Delegation doesn't always mean hiring a full-time employee. Sometimes it's as simple as asking for help from someone in your circle, trading services with a friend, or using a low-cost tool or service to automate the process. The point is this: the very first task you delegate should be one that frees not just your time, but your energy. Because energy is the real fuel for everything else you do. And how do you know it's the right one? Well, ask yourself 3 questions. First, does this task require my unique skills? Or could someone else do it at least 80% as well as I can? If the answer is yes, they could, then it's a candidate for delegation. Second, is this task repeatable? If you find yourself doing the same steps over and over again, it's a perfect handoff opportunity. Third, if I removed this task from my plate tomorrow, would I feel lighter and more focused? If you feel an instant yes in your gut, that's your sign. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine you pick one task this week to delegate, just one. And let's say it gives you back 2 hours of your time. 2 hours might not sound like much, but what if you use that time to start working on an idea you've been putting off? Or to take a walk and let your mind breathe? Or to finally call that friend you keep meaning to reconnect with? 2 hours could be the spark that changes your entire rhythm. And once you feel that shift, it becomes addictive in the best way. You start looking for the next task to hand off, and the next. And slowly, your calendar starts to feel like it belongs to you again. Dan often says that delegation is like opening a window in a stuffy room. At first, it feels strange. There's a rush of fresh air and maybe even a little discomfort as you adjust. But soon you realize how much better you can breathe. And here's something important. When you delegate, you're not just freeing yourself. You're creating opportunities for others. Someone out there is looking for exactly the kind of work you're handing off. It might be a virtual assistant building her portfolio, or a student eager to learn, or a fellow business owner who's great at the thing you hate doing. Delegation isn't dumping work on someone else. It's making space for everyone to play to their strengths. Of course, the first time you delegate, you might feel the urge to hover, to double-check everything. That's normal. But remember, perfect isn't the goal. The goal is progress. The more you let go, the more you'll see that others can handle it, and the better they'll get with time. And maybe you're still wondering, why not start with the biggest task instead of the most draining one? The answer is simple. This first delegation is as much about mindset as it is about time. You're building the habit of letting go. If you start with something you deeply dislike, the reward will feel instant and obvious. And that positive feedback will make it easier to keep going. So here's your challenge. Tonight, before you go to bed, write down 3 tasks you handled this week that drained you. Circle the one that makes you feel the most tired just thinking about it. That's your first delegate. And by this time, next week, you'll already know what buying back your time feels like. Because in the end, it's not about the size of the task. It's about the space you create for what really matters. And that space, even if it's just 2 hours, is the doorway to the life you actually want to live.